G'day everyone, I'm Smokescreen and welcome back to another video. And here we go with the next round of the test season Manufacturers Cup that just went on in Gran Turismo 7. We're at Suzuka today, and we're finally driving the Group 3 cars that we have chosen. If you haven't seen the previous video where we drove the Group 4 cars around Bathurst, you won't have seen that I've chosen Genesis as my manufacturer, the new car in Gran Turismo. But we're driving the Group 3 variant today, and we're going out for qualifying. So after Thanos snapped away half the lobby, we finally were able to get released from the pit lane, driving our Genesis X Gr.3. A little bit oversteery this machine, and we'll see that as this video goes on, but it was actually quite a big learning curve trying to get this car around the track, because it handled very much sort of like it had way more power than it actually does. You just cannot commit to the throttle. It's really doesn't provide too much comfort, because otherwise this happens as I just spin out on the exit of turn 2, going it taking it easy on the out lap, and I've spun out and crashed into the barrier, giving myself front bumper, front right wheel and engine damage. So I just cancel back to the pits and start again, because we have a nice lengthy session of about 7 minutes long here, so we get a good opportunity to get a solid lap in, and this is going to be the first lap of the session. I did a little bit of practice, a couple of hours practice. It took me a while to get up to the pace, but I eventually set a time trial time of 2 minutes 0.9, so that's sort of okay, I guess. But because we have cancelled back to the pits, we are last on the track in terms of track position. So I do have a couple of cars within the vicinity, within the first sector that I'm going through as well. So I do have to watch out if anybody makes a bit of a mistake, because it may mean they fall back within my path for my qualifying lap. Those first two apexes of the snake section weren't that great. I just went slightly too wide around the curb, not quite capitalising on the full track limits there. You definitely want to be mounting the curbs through that opening sector to try and help get the car rotated and keep your average speed up. But the second part of the S's weren't too bad, I suppose. You can oversteer horrifically on the exit of Dunlop as well. This corner is no longer a cut like it was in GT Sport, because it chucks the car violently up into the sky, and you can end up, in those gravel traps, just sunken down with gravel up to the door sills. You don't want that whatsoever. The hairpin, it's so difficult to get the car rotated here. Just so much lock on the car trying to get it turned, because for some reason the balance of performance also lock your brake balance to 0. So there's no brake balance. It's the same for everyone, of course, but some cars really need the different brake balance. Like a MR car, you may go forwards on the brake balance, maybe you go backwards in the brake balance when qualifying, but in terms of tyre wear, you definitely want a forward brake balance in an MR car. And an FR car like this Genesis X here, I definitely wanted a rear bias. I was pretty desperate for a rear brake bias, but I couldn't get there. But the current fastest up there, 2 minute 0.0 dead pretty much. I reckon Coburn there will probably be slightly upset he didn't actually get into the 159s. I couldn't even do that pace in time trial, let alone in qualifying, where I've set myself a 2:01.6 on the first lap there. This is the second lap here as we're exiting Degner 2, and we're about 1.5 tenths down there, so we've got some time to find. But then coming into here, I completely lose it on the curb. It's almost like the tyre gets stuck in the curb. I almost want to say it was a curb glitch there. That's what it felt like, but I think I think I just sort of hit it at the wrong angle, and it pulled the car in a strange direction. But it was sort of now a big race of time to get back around to the finish line to start a final flying lap there as we exit turn 18. We've got about 5 seconds remaining, and by the time we actually cross the line, we have 2 seconds remaining, so we left that quite tight. But at least we get one more chance late in the session to try and improve this qualifying time, and there's plenty of time to find. We can push the limits more into turn 1 here. That was a little bit better there, still taking it conservative, because I don't want to send it straight off the track at turn 1. Really easy to do. A little bit of a bobble on the exit of turn 3, and remember, we missed the curbs on our qualifying lap there. Slight dab of brake to get the car rotated in these conditions, and we're slightly wide off this left-hander here, but it's okay, because we're going to keep it nice and tight. Oh, we've run slightly wide on the exit there. Not the tidiest section, but overall about the same, closer to 0.5 tenth down on our 2:01.6. But it's sort of okay, because the majority of the time gain was later in the lap. I went slightly wide at the hairpin at turn 11, so there's definitely a big chunk of time to be found there. Let's see if we can get it on the power beautifully. A little bit of oversteer there, but we kept quite a high throttle percentage, and we haven't really lost any time in that second sector. We lost a load of time going too wide at this hairpin on our fast lap here. We managed to meet the apex, short shift up to second, and just get on the throttle. The car is really unstable out of that corner, but I found a way to get the throttle down slightly earlier than you would if you were being too aggressive. Just being nice and gentle, just pushing the throttle right to the limit, but not beyond it, and that was down to practice. Spoon now, let's get the car turned in. We were slightly undercommitted on spoon, on that mid part of spoon on our fast lap there, so we were able to get more throttle on the car halfway through spoon, and we use that curb on the exit, getting on the power as early as we dare, so as to not oversteer and lose control of the car. But heading down the back straight now, up towards 130R. Difficult to get right. We're slightly up there. Lift and turn in, keeping a high average speed of above 232 kilometers an hour, and then coming into the chicane, braking just before the 100 meter board and utilizing the track limits here. You can cut the second one like that, like we could on GT Sport, and then nice and tight towards the exit on the finish line. So easy to oversteer through that final turn. Up across the line, and it was a 201.3, and it improves us up a couple of spots. We get ourselves up in a fourth, ahead of Konzio and ToughRam. Konzio was an important one to qualify ahead of, because that's another Genesis, and Konzio is fairly similar to my pace on most occasions. So Konzio is really the benchmark, and that's something I've found in the early life cycle of these manufacturer series races, is I don't really know where the Genesis sits in the grand scheme of things, because all the cars have a new bop. So really everything that we learnt in GT Sport about what cars were good and what cars were bad, it's completely gone out the window, because Gran Turismo 7 has brand new bop. So I don't know where the Genesis sits in terms of actual ability of the car, not necessarily the driver. So I think at the early stages of these manufacturers series, all you're really looking to do is maximize your result within your manufacturer, and that means whatever race you happen to end up in, you've got to do your very best to be the top driver in your manufacturer. So there's two other drivers in this particular lobby that are driving with the Genesis X. That's Konzio, and there's another bloke further down the field in a Jack Daniels liveried Genesis X, so I don't have to worry too much about him, but I will worry about Konzio a little bit. I'd like to beat him, as there's oversteer coming out of Dunlop, so that's exactly what I'm talking about with this car. And honestly, that was the same for a lot of the Group 3 cars. Hayate Lily's gone a little bit wide, driving the Alfa Romeo, makes a complete hash of the Degner section. Let's see if we can get past them as we race up towards the hairpin. We're going to have the inside for the little kink at turn 10 here, and we're able to actually get the car completely ahead up in the hairpin now. I think ToughRam's gone up the inside of Hayate Lily as well, capitalising on their mistake, and that is Lily out of the picture now. So that's us up into third, which is decent, a podium paying position. We were actually ranked 1 in the lobby. I don't know if the lobby still ranks based on your DR, but I suppose we can assume it does. So the fact that I was sort of ranked quite high up the field, in fact the highest you can be before we did qualifying, I really should be fighting up the front, but it's become apparent at this stage I don't quite have the pace to be fighting the two up the front. So ToughRam is driving the Porsche 911, which appears to have a little bit of a straight line speed buff in this game compared to GT Sport. So he's going to have the slipstream heading down the back straight, but we are able to keep ahead, still about half a second. The slipstream once again is not as strong as it was in GT Sport, so you're definitely not gaining as much time in the slipstream of another car. But as we head into this section now, we have ToughRam. He's still about half a second behind, and we have to make sure to get the car stopped. He actually races in there with a little bit of a bump, sends us wide, and ends up completing the pass. So I wasn't too pleased about that one, because I felt like I broke perfectly on time. I was coming down for the apex, and then bang, I get a rear left quarter panel impact from ToughRam, who then sort of takes the inside for this turn 12. He does brake quite early, to be fair to him, so I think he probably was trying to redress, but I think the redress should have occurred right after the contact. He should have backed down to the throttle instead of actually completing that pass, because now I've had to sort of do some more work. I've actually had to compromise my line and compromise my speed on this lap to actually re-overtake Torque, who overtook me, perhaps illegally. So I was a little bit, just be careful, mate, about that one. Because, yeah, bump and run, and then he sort of didn't really make it as easy as he could have for the redress, but it's okay. We're still into third. We've lost a little bit of time to the leaders, so by the time we're finishing up this second lap here, we're 5 seconds behind. Hayate Lily is not close enough to actually put on any form of an attack down at turn 1 because it's still quite a long way away. He definitely does gain a little bit in the slipstream. I think that Alfa Romeo's had a little bit of a power buff as well. Oh, he's gone tumbling down the field. Hayate Lily's made a grave error through the opening section of the track here, and it just releases Talk Tuition back up into 4th with myself in 3rd. He's 1.3 seconds behind me now. By the end of this lap, which is the penultimate lap of the race, fairly quick race, only a little 4-lapper here, so about the length of a daily race B. He's 8 tenths behind, so we've got 1 lap to go, and Talk's putting the pressure on because he's definitely reeled me in there, and it's not like I've set a bad lap. I've set a 2:02.4. We have to remember we've got fuel use and tyre wear on in these races, albeit it's only 1 times 1 times, but the weight of the fuel just being in the car because the fuel use is on definitely just adds a little bit more weight and makes the car a little bit more cumbersome through all the corners. So it's definitely a 2:02.4 is not bad, but I think if I had a good couple of days to get up to the pace like I would if the races occurred maybe once, you know, in the frequency of 1 per week, I probably could be getting 2:01s in the race here. But in this particular test season with a race almost every day, I really didn't have too much of an opportunity to actually get up to my maximum pace in every single combination. So the fact that I'm just in the low 2:02s there, I'm holding my own on the podium position, I was actually quite satisfied with that, to be completely honest. But Talk Tuition's putting on quite a good fight here. He's still 9 tenths behind, and I think the Porsche 911 was a lot better in the hairpin here, because if you have a look down on the radar, he's closed in a lot of ground actually. He gained a couple of tenths in the braking zone there, and I think that rear engine or mid-engine Porsche 911 RSR is a lot better on the rotation phase of that hairpin. I spoke about before that this Genesis X was so difficult to get rotated that I really needed that rear brake bias, but it's locked for some reason being part of the setup, and it changes the performance point rating of the car. So a little bit how you're going, but on the exit here, massive moment there, a little bit of a wiggle of oversteer on the exit, but Talk Tuition is not close enough to actually capitalise on that. I don't think that Porsche 911 is actually that great in a straight line because I'm now actually gaining time. I think I said earlier in the video it's had a buff, but I still don't think it's that great actually, because I got a poor exit, but then by the end of the straight I was actually gaining on the Porsche, even though the Porsche had my slipstream. So it's definitely not the best car in a straight line, but it was definitely a lot better at the low speed stuff, which is the hairpin at this particular track. But I was able to just about do enough to be able to keep this podium paying position of 3rd, and I was actually quite satisfied with that there. I definitely didn't have the pace of the leaders, Koban and Sashimi there, setting quite a good time, an 8:03 for Koban, and then Sashimi 3.8 seconds off that. But as for myself, 8 seconds off the lead, it's not too bad because I did have a little bit of fighting with Talk in the mid stage of that race, but I'll take 3rd, and I think I got home with 277 points. But yes, the main thing I've learned is that these FR cars, these Group 3 cars, are definitely a lot more difficult to drive compared to GT Sport, a lot more oversteery. The rear end wants to step out all over the shop, so it's definitely a big learning curve to try and, you know, get back up to speed in the Group 3 cars. The Group 4 cars are okay, they're still fairly stable, but the Group 3 cars definitely require a little bit more practice nowadays, but that's okay. I do hope the races sort of drop in frequency to 1 or 2 a week like it used to be, instead of like 1 a day, because it's just too intensive and I'm losing time to other stuff I normally do. So I definitely have to try and balance that time better if this schedule does continue, but that can be a problem for another day. But as for this video, that's going to round it out today, so do hit the like button if you enjoyed, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos and streams from me. Do leave a comment as well. Questions, comments and constructive criticism, as always, very much appreciated. But that's going to be the end of this one today, and that means that is it from me. So once again, I do thank you very much for watching. See you later.